Homeless mom bought rotting boat for $500. Found WWII gold worth 20 murderers hidden inside. $500 for that floating disaster? You can't be serious. The auctioneer's voice cut through the rain, sharp with mockery. I clutched Lucy's small hand tighter as laughter rippled through the crowd. My last $500, the emergency fund I'd been saving since the eviction notice, crinkled in my sweaty palm. The rain soaked through my only good jacket, the one I wore to job interviews that never panned out. Lucy looked up at me, her 8-year-old eyes already carrying too much worry. 3 weeks of sleeping in our car had left dark circles under those eyes. 3 weeks of washing up in gas station bathrooms and telling her that tomorrow would be better. Going once for the sanctuary, the auctioneer called, making air quotes around the boat's name, a cruel joke given its condition. The wooden hull was rotted along the waterline, the cabin windows cracked or missing entirely. Nobody wanted it. Nobody except me. Sometimes the things nobody wants are the things we need most, I whispered to Lucy, squeezing her hand. Her small voice barely carried above the rain. Is it really going to be our home, Mom? I nodded, throat tight. For now, going twice. The auctioneer's voice held the tired boredom of a man who'd seen too many desperate people. The crowd had already started drifting away, heading for the covered pavilion where the better lots would be sold. I raised my hand, forcing my voice steady. 500. The laughter was immediate, sharp and cold as the rain. A man in an expensive raincoat turned to his friend. Lady's buying herself a coffin. The auctioneer blinked, genuinely surprised. 500 going once, going twice. Sold to the woman in the blue jacket. As I approached to sign the paperwork, a man in a Marina-logoed polo shirt intercepted me, despite the rain. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Victor Reynolds. I own this Marina. He looked me up and down, taking in my worn shoes, the backpack that held everything we still owned. Congratulations on your purchase of a watery grave, Ms. Taylor. Emma Taylor. I matched his gaze, refusing to look away first. He nodded toward Lucy, who was examining a puddle by the dock's edge. Not exactly family accommodations? We'll manage. His smile thinned. Marina fees are due first of the month. Fail to pay and your investment gets impounded. I swallowed hard. I hadn't thought about ongoing fees. How much? 200 monthly, plus utilities if you hook up. He seemed to enjoy watching the color drain from my face. Welcome to boat ownership. At the payment table, my hands trembled as I counted out the last of my money. The auctioneer slid the title across the wet table. It's slip 27 and a deed-doc. Keys should be in the lockbox. As I signed the final paper, an elderly man in faded coveralls shuffled up beside me. Deep lines mapped his weathered face, and his voice was a gravelly whisper. Be careful with that boat, he said, glancing over his shoulder. The last owner disappeared looking for something inside it. I froze, pen hovering above paper. What do you mean disappeared? He leaned closer, breath smelling of coffee and tobacco. Joseph, good man, came here from Europe after the war. Said he had something precious hidden away. Then one night, gone. Boat still here, Joseph wasn't. That was probably decades ago, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. The old man shrugged. Boat's been waiting for someone ever since. Just watch yourself is all I'm saying. I watched him shuffle away, then looked toward Lucy, my entire world, reduced to a small figure in a too large coat. The boat keys felt suddenly heavy in my hand. A home, yes, but at what cost? And what exactly had I just purchased with my last $500? The rain intensified as we walked down the weathered dock toward slip 27. Each step took us further from the world we knew and closer to the dark shape of the boat, our new home, our last chance, our sanctuary. Just before we reached it, I could have sworn I saw a shadow move behind one of the broken windows. I can't breathe in here, Mom. Lucy's voice caught between a gag and a sob as we stepped into the cabin. The smell hit me too, mold, rotting wood, and something darker that reminded me of old pennies. Water dripped steadily from 3 different spots in the ceiling, creating muddy puddles on the warped floorboards. I set our backpack on the least wet surface I could find, a built-in bench whose cushions had long since surrendered to mildew. Lucy stood frozen in the doorway, her small shoulders hunched, eyes wide with dismay. It just needs some love, I said, forcing brightness into my voice while my stomach twisted with doubt. The single light bulb dangling from the ceiling flickered weakly when I flipped the switch. In its sickly glow, our new home looked even worse. Peeling wallpaper, cabinets hanging from broken hinges, a narrow mattress in the back stained with what I hoped was just water damage. Lucy's lower lip trembled. Can we go back to the car? I knelt in front of her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. This is ours, Luce, our very own place. No one can make us leave. The words sounded hollow even to me. We spent the next hour clearing a small space, wiping down surfaces with paper towels I'd taken from the marina bathroom. As I pulled open a stuck drawer beneath the boat's navigation table, yellowed newspaper clippings fluttered out. The dates read 1945. Most were in English, but some were printed in what looked like German or Polish. A faded photograph showed a family standing on a dock, a stern-faced man, a woman clutching a baby, and two young boys. They looked exhausted but determined, their few possessions piled beside them. "Who are they?" Lucy asked, peering over my shoulder. "I'm not sure," I said. "Maybe the people who owned this boat a long time ago." Night fell quickly, the darkness outside absolute except for a distant security light at the marina entrance. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped inside. I'd positioned buckets under the worst leaks, creating an eerie, irregular drumming. Lucy sat huddled on the bench I'd cleaned, her stuffed rabbit, the only toy that had survived our downsizing, clutched to her chest. "I miss our apartment," she whispered suddenly, her voice breaking. "I miss my friends. I miss my room and she dissolved into tears, shoulders shaking. I wrapped my arms around her, my own eyes burning. "I know, baby. I miss it too." What could I say? That I was sorry I'd lost my job when the factory closed? That I was sorry the landlord wouldn't wait another month for rent? That I was sorry her father had walked out 3 years ago, leaving us nothing but debts? A knock at the cabin door made us both jump. I approached cautiously, wishing I had something more defensive than a flashlight. "Hello?" I called. "It's Gus," came a gruff reply. "Dockhand." I cracked open the door. The elderly man from the auction stood there, arms full of tarps and blankets. "Figured you might need these," he said, eyes taking in the cabin's condition. "First night's always the hardest." I accepted the bundle gratefully. "Thank you. I'm Emma. This is my daughter, Lucy." He nodded toward the newspaper clippings I'd set aside. "Found Joseph's old papers, I see. That boat's got history. Not all bad neither. Did you know him? The previous owner?" Gus's weathered face softened slightly. "Good man. Survived things most folks couldn't imagine." He glanced at Lucy, then back to me. "Lock up tight tonight." After he left, we spread the tarps over the leaking roof sections and made a nest of blankets on the cleanest part of the bench. Lucy fell asleep almost immediately, exhaustion overcoming discomfort. I was folding our few clothes when Lucy's foot slipped off the bench, hitting the floorboard with a hollow thunk. The sound was wrong, too resonant. I tapped my knuckles against the spot, definitely hollow. Carefully, I pried up the loose board. Beneath it was a small compartment, and inside, a rusted metal box, heavy and locked tight. Before I could examine it further, footsteps sounded on the dock outside. Through the cracked window, I saw Victor's silhouette approaching. His knock was more of a pound. "Miss Taylor?" A word. I slid the box back into its hiding place and covered it before opening the door just enough to see him. "It's late, Mr. Reynolds." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been thinking about your situation. I'll give you $1,000 for the boat. Cash. Tonight. A generous offer, considering that death trap isn't seaworthy." My spine stiffened. "This is our home now. It's not for sale. You'll change your mind," he said, no longer bothering to smile. People always do when reality sets in. After he left, I double-checked the flimsy lock and wedged a chair against the door. Lucy slept fitfully while I sat beside the hidden compartment, mind racing. Just past midnight, I heard it. Soft footsteps on the dock. Different from Victor's confident stride, these were cautious, deliberate. A shadow passed by the window, then stopped at the door. The handle turned slowly, testing the lock. My heart hammered against my ribs as metal scraped against metal. Someone was trying to force the lock. "I'm not leaving this boat again until it has real locks," I whispered to Lucy over breakfast. Stale granola bars from our dwindling supplies. My hands still trembled from last night's intruder. Whoever they were, they'd given up after 10 minutes of trying the lock. But the sound of those footsteps had haunted my sleepless hours. Lucy nodded solemnly, drawing on a paper napkin with her last stubby crayon. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Was it the monster from under the bed?" she asked, her voice smaller than it should ever be. "No monsters," I promised, kissing the top of her head. "Just people being nosy about our new home." Gus appeared at the dock an hour later with a toolbox and 3 different locks. "Marina special," he grunted, holding up a heavy deadbolt. "Nobody gets through this without you knowing about it." As he worked, drilling into the weathered doorframe, my mind drifted back to the night everything changed. 3 years ago, the police at our door at 2 a.m. Jack's car wrapped around a tree. Blood alcohol level twice the legal limit. I'd known he had a problem, but I never imagined. The insurance company had found a loophole. The bank took the house. Jack's gambling debts emerged like roaches from the woodwork. I'd managed to keep us afloat with 2 jobs until the factory closed last month. Then the final eviction notice, taped to our apartment door like a death sentence. "I'll never let you down again," I'd whispered to Lucy as we loaded our last possessions into the car. Now here we were, clinging to a rotting boat like it was the last lifeboat on the Titanic. "You're miles away," Gus observed, snapping me back to the present. "These marks mean anything to you?" He pointed to the doorframe where he was installing the lock. Small symbols were carved into the wood. Triangles, circles, strange lettering. I found more yesterday, I admitted, leading him inside. The morning light revealed what darkness had hidden. Dozens of tiny marks carved into the woodwork, some forming patterns, others seeming random. Numbers, letters, symbols I didn't recognize. All over the boat, Gus confirmed. Joseph used to trace them with his fingers, talking to himself in German. Lucy had taped her drawings to the cleanest wall, bright crayon pictures of our family, the boat reimagined as a gleaming yacht, fantastical underwater scenes with mermaids and treasure chests. Look, Mom, she said proudly, pointing to her newest creation. It's us when the boat is all fixed up. My heart twisted. In her drawing, the boat sparkled like new, and stick figure Lucy was smiling. I hadn't seen that smile in weeks. After Gus left, I took Lucy to the marina's main building, ostensibly for clean water, but really for the free Wi-Fi. While she played a game on my phone, I researched WWII boat owner. The search yielded more than I expected. A small article from 1945. Local business owner welcomes refugee. WWII, described as a survivor of Nazi persecution, had arrived with only the clothes on his back and a dream of American liberty. The photograph matched the one I'd found, the stern-faced man and his family, standing on this very dock. When we returned, Gus was waiting. Found something you should see, he said, leading us aboard. He pointed to a panel near the sleeping berth, slightly darker wood than the rest. That wall ain't original. False wall? I asked, feeling a chill despite the day's warmth. Gus nodded. Joseph was paranoid, kept saying he had something precious hidden away. Most folks thought he was crazy. He tapped the panel. But this ain't in the original blueprints. I ran my fingers along the edge, feeling for seams. Why are you helping us? His weathered face softened. My papa came through Ellis Island with nothing. Someone helped him, too. Before he could say more, Victor's voice rang out from the dock. Building inspector, Ms. Taylor. A man in a khaki uniform followed Victor aboard, clipboard in hand. His eyes swept the cabin critically. This vessel is clearly unfit for habitation, he announced, scribbling notes. Especially with a minor present. We're renovating, I said quickly. You have 48 hours to address these violations, he replied, handing me a form with at least 20 items checked. Or I'll be forced to condemn the vessel. After they left, Gus spat over the side. Victor's cousin. Does whatever he asks. We can't fix all this in 2 days, I whispered, reading the impossible list. No, Gus agreed. But maybe we find what Joseph hid. It helps somehow. That night, after Lucy fell asleep, I examined the false wall again. My fingers traced the carved symbols, pressing experimentally. One triangle felt different, slightly raised. I pressed harder. Something clicked deep inside the wall. Then a sound from below. A heavy metallic grinding. Something massive shifted inside the hull with a thunderous clunk that vibrated through the entire boat. It's like the boat is trying to tell us something, I whispered, my fingers trembling as I pried at the false wall. The metallic grinding had stopped, but I could still feel vibrations humming through the floorboards. Lucy slept on, exhausted. Her small form curled tightly against the cold. The panel finally gave way. Behind it was a narrow compartment barely wider than my arm. I shined my flashlight inside and my breath caught. A metal tube, the kind architects use for blueprints, sealed with wax and wrapped in oilcloth, waterproof, protected, hidden for decades. My heart raced as I carefully extracted it, half expecting booby traps or alarms. The tube was heavier than it looked. I broke the wax seal with trembling fingers and slid out the contents. A leather-bound journal, yellowed photographs, and documents with official-looking stamps. The journal's first page bore a simple inscription, "So they will remember, so they will know." WWII, 1945. I turned the page and began to read. Half was written in German, but enough was in English for my blood to run cold. April 18th, 1943. The gold teeth came first, then wedding rings, then the bank accounts. Before they took our lives, they took everything that proved we had lived at all. Joseph's handwriting grew more hurried as he described his family's escape from Berlin. His wife Rachel, sons David and Samuel, infant daughter Hannah. They'd bribed officials, hidden in cargo holds, survived on scraps, but they had something the Nazis wanted back. Gold. Family gold melted down and disguised, smuggled out, where no one would think to look. They can take our homes, our citizenship, our dignity, he wrote. But this legacy will survive. For my children, for their children. A photograph fell from between the pages. The same family from the newspaper clipping, but happier, taken in better times. I traced their faces with my fingertip. These ghosts whose boat now sheltered us. A harsh cough from Lucy snapped me back to the present. She'd been coughing more since we moved aboard, the dampness seeping into her lungs. Her cheeks looked flushed even in sleep. I placed a hand on her forehead. Fever. My stomach clenched. She needed medicine, maybe a doctor. But doctors meant questions. Where we lived, insurance cards I didn't have, records I couldn't access. Movement outside caught my eye. A sedan parked at the marina entrance, headlights off. Someone sat in the driver's seat, the orange glow of a cigarette visible through the windshield. Watching, waiting. Morning brought no relief. Lucy's cough had worsened, and dark clouds promised more rain. I was tucking the journal away when Gus appeared with a thermos of soup. Someone was watching the boat last night, I told him, voice low so Lucy couldn't hear. Gus's eyes hardened. Victor's been asking questions, offering money for information about you. Why does he care so much about this wreck? Same reason Joseph did, Gus replied. Something worth protecting. He nodded toward the journal. That might tell you what. That afternoon, while Lucy napped under fever medication I could barely afford, Gus introduced me to Marina, a gray-haired librarian with kind eyes and a Polish accent. My father knew Joseph, she explained, carefully examining the journal pages. They came on the same boat. Different stories, same nightmares. She translated passages I couldn't read, her voice catching on Joseph's descriptions of families separated at train stations, possessions catalogued and stolen. The gold his grandfather had hidden beneath a floorboard that became their passport to freedom. This part, Marina said, finger-tracing German script, is important. What truly matters lies beneath the waterline, hidden where the heart of the boat beats strongest. The engine room? I guessed. Marina shook her head.
The keel!
The very center that keeps a boat balanced. That night, as rain lashed against the windows, Lucy's fever finally broke. I sat beside her, one hand on her forehead, the other holding Joseph's journal, piecing together clues. Then I heard it, a faint rhythmic sound beneath the storm. Not rain, not waves, mechanical, deliberate, drilling. I crept to the window. A beam of light pulsed beneath the water next to our hull. A moment later, a diver surfaced, just for a second, equipment glinting in the darkness. Someone was trying to access the hull from below, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. I saw your diver last night. I planted myself in front of Victor's marina office, arms crossed, voice steadier than my nerves. Want to explain why someone's trying to cut into my boat from underwater? Victor looked up from his desk, his surprise quickly masked by a practiced smile. The office reeked of expensive cologne and old coffee, trophies from fishing tournaments lining the walls behind him. Diver? Ms. Taylor, you must be mistaken. He leaned back in his leather chair, eyes cold despite his smile. Though I'm not surprised the boat is having structural issues. It's been deteriorating for years. This wasn't deterioration. This was someone with professional equipment. Victor stood slowly, towering over me. Paranoia isn't a good look on you, especially with a child to consider. His voice hardened. Speaking of considerations, marina fees are due tomorrow. Cash only for new tenants. My stomach dropped. $200 I didn't have. I need more time. Business is business. He placed a check on the desk between us. Or my offer still stands. $2,500 for the boat. You could rent a nice apartment for a few months with that. I left without answering. Rage and fear fighting for control. The morning sun glinted off the water, mocking my darkening situation. Two seagulls fought over a scrap of bread on the dock, the larger one eventually driving the smaller away. Back at the boat, I found Lucy sitting with Gus. Her fever gone, but her spirits still low. There's a job, Gus said quietly. Cleaning boats for the weekend warriors. Cash daily. Owner owes me a favor. That afternoon, I scrubbed decks and cabins on luxury yachts while Lucy stayed with Gus. My hands cracked and bled from harsh cleaners, my back screaming as I crawled into tight spaces with a toothbrush to scrub where rich people never looked. 8 hours earned me $70. Not enough, but a start. When I returned, exhausted, Lucy was drawing at the small table we'd salvaged from the marina dumpster. I drew us a swimming pool, she said, holding up her picture. For when we're not poor anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. I knelt beside her, gathering her small hands in my raw red ones. Are we always going to be poor, Mom? Her eyes, so like her father's, searched my face for truth, not comfort. I wanted to lie, to promise her ponies and swimming pools. Instead, I said, things will get better. I promise. Not because of luck or magic, but because we won't give up. She nodded solemnly. Like Joseph didn't give up. I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. Exactly like that. The next morning, Gus appeared with a small rowboat and a determined expression. Time to see what's worth drilling for, he said, patting a waterproof flashlight. We rode beneath the sanctuary, Gus steadying the boat while I leaned over with the flashlight. The murky water revealed little until we reached the center of the hull. There, Gus whispered, pointing. A rectangular panel, professionally welded onto the hull, newer than the surrounding metal, yet old enough to have accumulated years of barnacles. Not part of the original design. Deliberately added. Deliberately hidden. That's no standard repair, Gus murmured. That evening, Marina appeared at our dock, carrying books on Jewish history and German translation. Her eyes lit up when I showed her photographs of the welded panel. My grandfather escaped Warsaw with diamonds sewn into his coat lining, she confided, voice dropping. Joseph may have had something similar in mind, but bigger. Why tell me this? I asked. Marina's eyes, sharp despite her age, met mine. Because history doesn't belong to whoever has the most money or power. It belongs to those who remember. She squeezed my hand. Whatever you find, I'll help document it properly. Over the next days, a strange thing happened. Word spread through the marina about the single mom fighting to keep her boat and her dignity. A retired plumber fixed our leaking roof. A fisherman's wife brought homemade stew. 2 teenagers helped scrape barnacles from the hull. With each small kindness, our isolation eased. I earned enough from cleaning to pay the marina fee, watching Victor's face tighten when I counted out worn bills onto his desk. Each day I examined Joseph's journal, each cryptic clue bringing me closer to his secret. Finally, I made my decision. Whatever lay beneath that welded panel, it deserved to be found, not stolen in the night by mysterious divers. Gus helped me borrow underwater cutting tools from a maintenance shed. As the sun set, we gathered our equipment on the dock. Lucy was safely with Marina at the library, away from whatever we might unleash. Ready? Gus asked, holding the cutting torch. I nodded, heart pounding. Ready, Ms. Taylor? A sharp voice cut through the twilight. 2 men in dark suits approached, badges flashing in the fading light. Government badges. We need to talk about the ownership history of this vessel, the taller one said, his eyes flickering to our equipment. And what exactly you're planning to do with that torch? FBI art crime team. The taller agent flipped open his badge. I'm Agent Mercer. This is Agent Delgado. We've been tracking assets smuggled out of Europe during World War II. My mouth went dry. The cutting torch in Gus's hand suddenly felt like damning evidence. We're just doing repairs, I managed. Agent Delgado's eyebrow arched. On a historically significant vessel with underwater cutting equipment? At sunset? Historically significant? My voice sounded small even to my own ears. Mercer nodded toward the sanctuary. This boat arrived in 1945 carrying Joseph Weiss and what remained of his family. We have reason to believe it also carried items of interest to the U.S. government. They escorted us to the Marina Cafe, now closed for the night. As Agent Delgado made coffee, Mercer spread photographs across the table. Younger Joseph, documents with swastika stamps, manifests listing confiscated assets. If this vessel contains Nazi-looted artifacts, Mercer explained, his voice softening slightly at my expression, it falls under the Holocaust Expropriated Art Recovery Act. The boat would be temporarily seized as evidence. Seized. The word echoed in my head like a death knell. But it's our home, I whispered. We have nowhere else. Something flickered in Mercer's eyes. Sympathy, quickly buried beneath professional detachment. My grandmother's voice suddenly filled my memory. I was 12, listening to her stories about the Polish village she'd fled during the war. They took everything, she'd said, her accent thickening with emotion. Not just possessions, identity, history, family, everything. I hadn't understood then. I was beginning to now. I found Joseph's journal, I admitted, meeting Mercer's surprised gaze. I know what he escaped, what they did to his family. You have his journal? Delgado leaned forward. I nodded. And I'll show you everything, but I'm going to be present for whatever you find. This boat is all my daughter and I have left. They exchanged glances. We can work with that, Mercer finally said. When I returned to the sanctuary to collect the journal, Lucy was waiting, Marina at her side. My daughter's eyes were wide with fear. Are they going to take our boat? She asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I knelt to her level. They're interested in the boat's history. But I promise you, I took her small hands in mine, whatever happens, we're going to be okay. I won't let anyone take our future away. Dawn broke with Marina translating Joseph's journal for the agents, while Gus helped them prepare diving equipment. Victor arrived, his face thunderous when he spotted the federal vehicles. This is private property, he began, then stopped cold when Mercer flashed his badge. Mr. Reynolds, Mercer said. Convenient timing. We were just discussing the unusual interest certain parties have shown in this particular vessel. Something shifted in Victor's expression. Calculation, replacing anger. My grandfather was the captain, he said suddenly, eyes fixed on the journal in Marina's hands. Captain Reynolds. He helped Joseph's family escape Europe. For a price. The pieces clicked into place. You knew, I said. All along, you knew what was hidden here. Victor's smile was cold. Family history. Grandfather always regretted not getting his full payment. Said Joseph cheated him, or refused to be robbed twice, Marina muttered. By noon, the divers had attached equipment to the welded panel. I stood on deck, Lucy's hand tight in mine as they cut through decades-old metal. The sound of torches underwater came as muffled screeching that set my teeth on edge. We've breached the compartment, crackled a voice over the radio. Preparing to extract contents, Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, a waterproof container emerged from the water, large and heavy enough to require 2 divers to handle. On the dock, with federal agents, marina residents, and Victor all watching, Agent Mercer carefully opened the sealed container. Gasps echoed across the water. Inside lay dozens of gold bars, each stamped with Nazi eagles, tarnished but unmistakable, and worth millions. But atop the gold lay something else, a waterproof packet containing a single envelope, yellowed with age, written across it in faded ink, "To the finder." My hands trembled as Mercer handed it to me. "I believe this is addressed to you, to the finder of this gold," I read aloud, my voice shaking. "You hold in your hands not treasure, but testimony." The crowd on the dock fell silent. Agent Mercer stood beside me, his professional detachment slipping as Joseph's words emerged from the past. "This gold was taken from those who took everything from us," the letter continued. "From officers who wore insignia while my mother and sisters vanished into ash. From men who catalogued wedding rings pried from the fingers of the dead. I do not call it theft. I call it the smallest measure of justice." I paused, feeling the weight of Joseph's pain across decades. In the silence, the lapping of water against the hull seemed unnaturally loud. The gold must serve as memory when I am gone. Not to build fortunes, but to build remembrance. So the world never forgets what was done to us, and what we survived despite their best efforts. When I finished reading, Marina wiped tears from her eyes. Even Agent Delgado looked away, blinking hard. Only Victor seemed unmoved, his eyes fixed on the gold rather than the letter. "That's a convenient story," he said, breaking the reverent silence. "But my grandfather was promised payment for the considerable risk he took smuggling them out." "Your grandfather was paid," Agent Mercer responded, holding up a manifest from his file. "Quite handsomely, according to these records. $5,000 in 1945, the equivalent of over $75,000 today." Victor's face reddened. The agreement was for more. As federal agents secured the gold into evidence containers, Mercer explained the legal process ahead. "The gold will remain in federal custody while ownership is determined. Nazi-looted assets fall under special jurisdiction. But what about us?" I asked, gesturing to the boat. "This is our home. The vessel itself isn't being seized," he clarified. "But I'd suggest securing legal representation. Mr. Reynolds will certainly file a claim." He was right. By nightfall, Victor had engaged a lawyer specializing in property reclamation. When news of the gold spread, reporters descended on the marina, thrusting microphones in my face, asking how it felt to strike it rich. 3 days later, Marina organized a fundraiser at the library. "Legal defense for Emma and Lucy," the handwritten signs proclaimed. Local families brought baked goods and crafts to sell. The elderly fisherman passed a hat for donations. A retired attorney offered pro bono consultation. "Why do we need defense?" Lucy asked, watching the community gather on our behalf. "We didn't do anything wrong." I knelt beside her, searching for words a child could understand. "Sometimes people fight over things because they think those things will make them happy. They forget what really matters in life." "Like having a home?" she asked. "Like having each other," I answered, pulling her close. Marina's research into Joseph's history revealed more than we expected. "He established a foundation in 1960, she explained, spreading newspaper clippings across our small table, "dedicated to building a memorial and education center, but it folded after his disappearance. So he was planning to use the gold for exactly what his letter said," I murmured. "Precisely." Marina hesitated. "I've found something else. About Captain Reynolds." The documents she'd uncovered painted a damning picture. Victor's grandfather hadn't just been a ship captain seeking payment. Letters in his own hand revealed Nazi sympathies and a plan to claim the gold for himself. A plan Joseph had apparently discovered and thwarted. As the legal battle intensified, I found myself caring less about potential riches and more about Joseph's vision. This wasn't about solving my financial problems. It was about honoring a promise that had waited decades to be fulfilled. "Whatever happens," I told Gus one evening, "that gold needs to serve Joseph's purpose, not mine." He squeezed my shoulder. "You're becoming a proper guardian of history." The next morning, as Lucy and I returned from grocery shopping with our meager supplies, an unfamiliar car sat at our dock. Beside it, an elderly man in a wheelchair was being helped onto the gangway by a nurse. He looked up as we approached, his eyes widening at the sight of Lucy. Despite his frail appearance, those eyes were sharp, intelligent, and unmistakably familiar from Joseph's photographs. "I'm David Weiss," he said, his voice strong despite his age. "Joseph's son. I've come about my father's gold. My father never stopped looking for this boat." David's weathered hands trembled as he touched the worn railing of the sanctuary. We sat on deck, the afternoon sun warming us as Agent Mercer recorded his testimony. Lucy sat cross-legged nearby, watching David with undisguised fascination. "I was 12 when we arrived in America. David continued. Father had already sent the gold ahead, hidden inside the boat's keel where no inspector would think to look. And the gold itself? Mercer asked, his pen poised. Can you confirm its origins? David's eyes hardened. The Nazis took everything from us. Our home in Berlin, our family business, my mother's entire family. When Father learned he would be transporting Nazi officers fleeing prosecution, he considered it cosmic justice, to relieve them of what they had stolen from others. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. The officers were too busy vomiting over the side during a storm to notice Father accessing their footlockers. They assumed their gold was lost in the chaos of evacuation, so it wasn't stolen from Holocaust victims, I said, relief washing through me. No, it was reclaimed from perpetrators. David reached for the journal in my hands. May I? As he turned the pages, tears welled in his eyes. His handwriting. I'd forgotten. Over the next hours, David filled in the gaps of Joseph's story. How after establishing a new life in America, Joseph had tried to retrieve the gold to fund a memorial. How he disappeared during that attempt. We presumed he drowned, David said. The boat was found adrift, but Father was gone. Captain Reynolds claimed no knowledge of what happened. 3 days later, the federal agents called a meeting at the Marina office. Victor sat with his lawyer, confidence radiating from his expensive suit. David's nurse had positioned his wheelchair by the window, where sunlight illuminated his dignified profile. Based on Mr. Weiss's testimony and supporting documentation, Mercer announced, the Justice Department has determined that the gold is not Nazi-looted property in the traditional sense. As such, it falls under standard maritime salvage laws. Victor leaned forward. My grandfather's contract has been reviewed and rejected, Delgado interrupted, sliding papers across the table. Your grandfather was paid his agreed fee. Furthermore, we've uncovered correspondence suggesting he may have been involved in Joseph Weiss's disappearance. Victor's face drained of color. The gold legally belongs to the Weiss family, Mercer continued, with a standard finder's fee of 20% to Ms. Taylor as salvager. 20%. The number echoed in my head. Even a fraction of the gold's value would change everything for Lucy and me. As we left the meeting, Marina handed me a folder. Found these in town records. Victor's been trying to buy every slip in the marina. He planned to demolish it for condominiums. I stared at the development plans, understanding finally dawning. He needed my boat, Joseph's boat, to complete the set. That evening, I sat with David and Lucy on the sanctuary's deck. Stars reflected in the dark water as we shared a simple meal. I've made a decision, I said finally. About the finder's fee, David raised an eyebrow. I want enough for a modest home for Lucy and me. The rest should go toward Joseph's memorial. It's what he would have wanted. David reached across the table, his hand covering mine. You've done what my family could not. You've completed Joseph's journey. Later, as I tucked Lucy into bed, a real bed now, delivered that afternoon by community members, she looked up at me with eyes wise beyond their years. I'm proud of you. Mom, she whispered, my throat tightened. When had my little girl grown so perceptive? For what, sweetheart? For doing the right thing, even though you could have kept all the money. The following morning, David and I met with attorneys to establish the Joseph Weiss Memorial Trust. While the gold would fund a museum and education center, the sanctuary itself would remain with us, a living piece of history. As we finished signing papers, a courier arrived with an envelope stamped urgent. What now? I sighed, accepting the delivery. The courier nodded toward the boat. Just came from record search. That vessel's officially historic now. Required inspection revealed an additional sealed compartment beneath the captain's berth. Thought you'd want to know right away. David's eyes met mine, a spark of wonder igniting. Father always said the gold was just the means. The memories were the true treasure. Some treasures can't be measured in gold. David's voice was soft as we knelt before the newly discovered compartment beneath the captain's berth. The marina's morning sounds faded away. Gulls calling, halyards clanking against masts, the gentle lap of water against hulls, all reduced to background noise as we carefully lifted the false floor. Inside lay a copper box, green with age but intact. My hands trembled as I lifted it, surprised by its weight. Lucy pressed against my side, her breath warm on my cheek. Open it, Mom, she whispered. The lid creaked open, revealing contents wrapped in oilcloth and silk. Layer by layer, Joseph's most precious possessions emerged. Not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable to a man who had lost everything. Photographs, dozens of them, preserved against time and salt. A young Joseph dancing with a dark-haired woman in pre-war Berlin. Children playing in a sunlit garden. Family gathered around a Sabbath table, faces bright with laughter. My mother, David whispered, touching a portrait with trembling fingers. And here, my brother Samuel. My sister Hannah. His voice broke. We thought these were lost forever. Beneath the photos, 2 wedding rings tied with faded ribbon, a child's small wooden dreidel, A prayer book with handwritten notes in the margins, a lock of baby's hair, a hand-drawn map of a neighborhood that no longer existed. Lucy lifted a silver locket, tarnished but beautiful. Inside, a miniature family portrait, Joseph, his wife and their children, frozen in time before the world shattered around them. These were what he really wanted to preserve, I said, understanding washing over me, not the gold. The Nazis tried to erase us. David nodded, tears streaming freely down his weathered cheeks. These prove they failed. Word of the discovery spread quickly. By afternoon, the Historical Society had arrived, reverently cataloging each item. The local newspaper sent a photographer. Marina brought white gloves and archival boxes. These items tell the human story behind the statistics, the society director explained. We'd like to feature them in a permanent exhibition, with your permission, of course. Within weeks, the marina transformed. Signs directed visitors to historic Dock D, where the sanctuary floated, newly restored with funds from the trust. The gold had purchased justice in the form of education. A sleek museum building rose near the marina entrance, dedicated to Joseph's story and thousands like it. My finder's fee, modest by choice but substantial nonetheless. Bought a small blue house overlooking the water, just a 5-minute walk from the boat. After years of instability, I signed mortgage papers with disbelieving hands. Is this really ours? Lucy asked, running through empty rooms that echoed with possibility rather than despair. Really ours, I confirmed, watching her twirl in patches of sunlight. No one can take it away. One morning, as I supervised the installation of display cases on the sanctuary, a young man approached, his resemblance to Victor unmistakable despite his nervous demeanor. Ms. Taylor? I'm Michael Reynolds, Victor's son. He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to apologize for my father's actions. He doesn't speak for our whole family. I studied his face, finding sincerity where I expected deception. Thank you. I've studied museum curation, he continued. If you need help with the exhibition. Later that day, the trust committee approached me with an unexpected proposal. We need a director for the memorial, David explained. Someone who understands both the historical importance and the human story. Someone who protected Joseph's legacy when they could have claimed it for themselves. Me? I asked, stunned. But I don't have the credentials. You have something more important, David replied. Integrity. On moving day, as we packed our few belongings from the boat into boxes bound for our new home, Lucy crawled into the berth one last time, her small hand feeling along the edge of the wall. Mom, she called suddenly. There's something carved here. I knelt beside her, flashlight illuminating faded letters carved into the wooden panel, hidden for decades behind a cabinet that we'd just removed. For whoever finds sanctuary here, I read aloud, remember this. The true sanctuary is never a place, but the heart of those who protect what matters most. I traced Joseph's carved words with my fingertips, feeling the indentations he'd left decades ago. In that moment, it was as if he stood beside us, this man I'd never met whose legacy had changed everything. 1 year later, those words were engraved on a bronze plaque at the entrance to the Joseph Weiss Memorial Museum, formerly the derelict boat that had sheltered us when we had nowhere else to go. Welcome to Sanctuary. Lucy's confident voice carried across the deck as she led another tour group through the boat. At 9 years old, she'd appointed herself the museum's youngest docent. This is where our life really began. Visitors followed her like ducklings, enchanted by the child who told Joseph's story with such personal connection. She showed them the hidden compartments, the restored captain's berth, the photographs of Joseph's family now protected in museum-quality displays. My mom found the gold right here, she explained, pointing to the spot in the hull. But the real treasure was the memories Joseph saved. From the dock, I watched her with a pride that threatened to burst my chest. How far we'd come from that rainy auction day when $500 had seemed like an impossible sum. The finder's fee had bought us more than a home. Working with David and the trust, we'd transformed the marina's abandoned boathouse into transitional housing for homeless families. 5 units, each with private bathrooms and kitchenettes. A computer lab for job searches. A play area where children could be children. The Lisa Reynolds Memorial Housing, Michael had suggested, naming it after his mother. His father Victor had left town shortly after the gold was discovered, his development dreams shattered. But Michael had stayed, working tirelessly alongside us to honor both our families' legacies. Marina now ran weekly history workshops in the community room. Gus, though officially retired, kept the grounds immaculate. And David visited every Sunday, holding court on the deck, sharing stories with anyone who would listen. Ms. Taylor? A young woman approached, a sleeping toddler on her hip. We're moving out next week. Found an apartment we can afford. That's wonderful, Tanya. I squeezed her hand. The 4th family to transition successfully this year. I never thought... Her voice caught. We were sleeping in our car when we found this place. I know exactly how that feels, I assured her. As sunset painted the marina gold, we gathered for the museum's official first anniversary. Standing on the deck where I'd once huddled in fear, I faced a crowd of neighbors, supporters, and families who'd found their own sanctuary here. Sometimes I said, my voice carrying across the water, the most valuable things are hidden in what others think is worthless. A rotting boat, a forgotten story, a family with nothing but hope. I met Lucy's eyes in the crowd, saw my own journey reflected in her smile. Joseph understood that sanctuary isn't just shelter. It's continuation. It's saying to the world, we are still here. We matter. Our story isn't over. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Lucy and I stood on the dock, watching visitors explore the boat in the golden evening light. Her hand slipped into mine, warm and secure. Are you glad we bought the boat, Mom? She asked, leaning against my side. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, remembering the desperation of that day, the fear, the uncertainty. It was the best $500 I ever spent, better than $20 million in gold, she teased. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, watching the sunlight dance across the water. We didn't just find gold, Lucy. We found our purpose, and that's worth more than $20 million could ever buy.